Well, you can't see the first part of the title, but well, you can have it in the program. So I will talk about Atapuerca, one of Sima del Elefante, the lower part. Here you see the Sierra de Atapuerca another time, and with the localities indicated which have been excavated in black and which are presently excavated in red. And one of them is Sima del Elefante. It's situated here. There's a new locality, Cueva del Fantasma. It's huge. It's a very big one. It's very interesting. Well, I'm here to talk about the other one. Now, this is Sima del Elefante. This photograph is from 1995, 6 or 7 or so, when we just started. We started actually in 1995 and cleaning the locality and excavating it. You see here a part of the Sierra de Atapuerca from above. And you see this trench here, the railway trench, which was made in the late 19th century and which cut through several fissure fillings, including Faunal, Grandolina, Galleria, and Sima del Elefante. Yeah? The stratigraphy of Sima del Elefante, we've got many units. The lowest one is by now TE7, so we have some numbers to go when we go deeper. Here you see the same thing in relation to ship to the cave system and some sondage. And yeah, the sondage is going on. Now we excavated this also, so that's huge. This is about 20 meters from the road level in the railway trench. These levels, TE19 and TE18, especially TE19, is very rich. A lot of aqueous and some other species, also lithics. In TE18, it's poorer. And then these localities all have normal polarity till TE15. But TE17, 16, and 15, they don't have anything of lithics or bones or whatever. Yeah? There's a datation here at that place, I think something like 350,000 or more than 350,000. So the datation didn't work. Yeah, and there, the yellow ones, they have reversed polarity. Yeah? There's a datation in TE7 of, I think, 1.1 million year, approximately, and another one in TE9 of about 1.2 million years. So that is a little bit strange. The oldest one should be below. Yeah? So we need the error margins to make it fit, and I think for the both, I take something like 1.15 as an age. Yeah? Now, these levels from TE7 to TE14, they all have fauna and they also have lithics. Yeah? Also lithics in TE7 at the lowermost level. Now, here you see the excavation. You see some human remains here. And I'm referring to the fossil, not the hand below. And we've got here the excavation at the level TE9. Yeah? The mandible comes from somewhere here at the back, near to the wall, and the phalanx comes from somewhere to the front here. Yeah? This is a similar view, but you see a little bit more of the foreground. At present, we are excavating in this area here, in TE7, and we are excavating a skeleton of a pig. And it seems to be, as far as we get now, it's going to be a complete skeleton. There's also another individual and a juvenile. So we've got a male, female, and a juvenile. Now the fauna. There's macaca. Initially, I started finding in the Bolsas de Nivel, the not coordinated specimens, very small phalanges of macaca. Now this is a big one. But now people are attentive and they don't escape anymore. Yeah? So macaca, mostly phalanges, some teeth. And then we've got carnivores. Lynx, there's a skeleton of lynx. And here you see part of a skull and a mandible. Yeah? There's few remains of Ursus, Mustela paleoarmenia, Paranogala. There's a part of a skull of Vulpes. Very few remains of Panthera gombacephensis and good remains of Panonictis. I'm lost now. I don't study the carnivores, but there's either two skulls and one pair of mandibles, or two pairs of mandibles and one skull. And then there is a small dog. Yeah? And now I've got very bad news for you. Very bad news. So this congress here is called something like the Mammoth or Mammutus meridionalis, it's in the title. And yesterday we had many talks about mammoths and other proboscidea, yeah? And people are focusing very much on that. Now, Sima del Elefante may have raised expectations, yeah? I'm sorry, this is the only thing I can show you. It's a plate of a milk tooth. It's about 1.2 to 1.4 millimeters wide. And there's nothing else. For the age, we think it's probably Mammutus meridionalis. But as you understand, it's impossible to be sure. Well, okay, then there is hippo. There's a large deer, a Cladosaurus julie, which is called for something you can't see here, but the nice apples with all the branches. But we've got bad luck. You've got only such an antler. The first year's antler, a spike. Yeah? There's some remains of Stephanorhinus etruscus or Confer etruscus, of which this badly preserved astragalus is the most impressive one. Yeah? So it's also not very good. There's more of Acus, and there's this phalanx, for instance. There are some teeth, but it's difficult. I think it's Acus altitans. It's not a very large horse. It's relatively gracile, but I could not exclude Acus meridoniensis. That's why I asked before the question about Acus meridoniensis. Yeah? And there is a bison. We've got a skull. You can see it's a beautiful specimen. A pity that horncores are gone, but we've got also undeformed bones. We've got a very nice mandible. It's a large bison, and the bones are relatively gracile. It best fits bison manner, but I can't be sure. It takes lots of years to excavate this, and specimens are coming out just little by little. It's very difficult. And now we've got here another question. We've got this pig skeleton. Yeah, since we're excavating now a pig skeleton, and since I like the pigs a lot, I talk a little bit more on this. Traditionally, the idea was that there is two species of pigs in the Pleistocene of Europe. And originally, Guérin and Vaughan published that first Sustronzi until their zone 20, and from zone 20 onward, Suscopha. So apparently, these two species overlap in temporal distribution. Now, later, I published a paper together with Salvador Maya on pigs, and then I was mostly interested in the Miocene, not so much in the Pleistocene. I didn't have data. And Salvador said, there's a time without pigs, because they're not in Cueva Victoria, they're not in Bentamithena. Yeah? But I didn't trust that. My data were incomplete, and so if you look to the graph, which, the graph of that paper is not here, but in any case, there's a period without pigs, yeah, in this graph. I published more extensive graphs. This one was in Paleontologia e Evolution, published in Sabadell. There's another one. This is on the European pigs, another one on the Spanish pigs. And it all appears this period here when there is no pigs. And that is zone MM2, I think. So biozonation made by Agustí and Salvador Maya, yeah? And someone else, Pons Maya. But you see, there's many localities here, but here there's few data. So basically, my data were incomplete, and in none of the papers I have stated ever that there is a pig hiatus. More recently, it was published that there is a time without pigs. But also in 2017, I published a paper with a graph which is very similar to this. And you see there are various localities here in this period between 1.2 and 1.8 million years. Yeah, and you can see one of those is spirals. It's not good material. It's kept in the Natural History Museum in London. They're distal metapodules, and you can see clearly that they're big, but doing a determination of a species on the basis of that is a little bit too much. But the locality is interesting because it has been dated very precisely. It's 1.47 million years. Yeah. So that's right in the middle of this supposed hiatus. There's also a number of other localities with peaks, also East Frampton. That's a better material. So I think that is a hypothesis, but it's discarded. Yeah. Then people have published that Sustotzi ends up all till the Middle Pleistocene. Yeah. I've published a long time ago in 1999 in the Journal of Human Evolution that Suscofa in TD6 in Atapuerca. Now, where do they differ in Sustotzi and Suscofa? Well, in the first place, in the canine. Here you see a canine of Suscofa with a scrophic section, which means a wide posterior side, narrow labial side. And this is actually from Valonet. And that's a canine of an adult, as you can see, totally adult, with a shorter posterior section or narrower and longer labial section side. Yeah, you can plot that in diagram: posterior side, labial side, and then you see Suscofa is well separated from Sustotzi. Sustotzi are the blue ones. Yeah, the colors correspond: blue to blue, blue to blue, red to red, and gray and black to black. Yeah. So that's one of the differences. Another difference between the two is in the width of the premolars. Now you see they all have about the same length, called DAP here, but they differ in the width, the DTP. Yeah, and you see Suscofa here, Sustotzi here, widely separated. This also happened in the P3. And you see this specimen here, this dot, is this specimen from PD6. So that's a Suscofa, in my opinion. Yeah. So Suscofa here and PD6. Yeah. And then this, I will call this the red pig. So it's not, I think it's different from the others, but there are names around Sustamanensis or Susaps chronicus. I won't discuss that now. I will just call it the red pig. Now, we've got the red pig here, which is similar to Sustotzi in several things. Its molars have approximately the same size, but the canines, they are varicosic from the section from cis varicosis. Yeah? They're like, more or less, like Sustotzi, but they're much smaller. So that's the difference in proportions. Yeah. And if we look to the premolars, the P4 at least, they're in between. They're not very wide, not very narrow. Probably narrow, wide premolars is primitive. It's a holdover of the situation in Propotama. Yeah. So this one is intermediate. Now then there are many other features, like the morphology of the second upper incisor, which in Sustotzi has a lingual cusp or lingual cingulum, and in Suscofa doesn't have it, and in which the red pig is more like Suscofa. The lower third incisor, the proportions of the tooth row, and there are many other things also. The molars, as I said, of the red pig are as big as those of Sustotzi. But if you look to the bones, they're as big as of a living Suscofa from Spain, and that's actually small. So there are different proportions between bones and teeth, and so I think there's reason to believe that these are different. Yeah, so the red pig is different. Now this has a lot of implications for stratigraphy. Pigs are not abundant in Europe. They were abundant as I can show you, these are all pigs of some type or another. So you see in the Miocene, this is the Miocene here, there were many species all at the same time, and up to 6 species in one locality and up to 8 species in Europe. But from a certain time onward, species diversity decreased, and actually this and this one are not considered now as separate. And so I think it's unlikely that we had at the, to the right. Here we see again the sus profile. I think it's unlikely that we had 2 at the time. So I would place the ones with this red pig also present in Valparadis, to be older than sus profile. So Valparadis is dated 850,000, and Atapuerca TD6 should be latest early Pleistocene. So I think the situation is like this. Then Klum and Gombasuk were believed to be early middle Pleistocene, but they have the red pig. So I would place them a little bit lower. This is also consistent with some other taxa, but I won't talk about that. Yes, I will leave it at this. So I think this red pig is restricted to this period. Then we've got Atapuerca, again. Then we've got also Dama. I shouldn't talk too much about this, but there's Dama. Some people recognize Pseudodama. That are all the species with branching antlers. Now, I place them all in Dama also, or nearly all. And the palmate ones are these ones here, Dama clactoniana and Dama dama. Now, you can measure a lot of on the antlers, and you can separate the branching group of species on the basis of the morphology of the lower part of the antler. So basically, I measure the height of the first bifurcation, which is this one here, and the anterior-posterior diameter, which is this one here, or this one. Yeah, and you see the blue species here, they end up very high in the graph. They're not very large, but they have a high bifurcation. So that's Dama felici, Dama renana. And then you've got the pink or purple species. That is Dama nesti, yeah? So that's different. And then there's Dama farnetensis or Dama nesti farnetensis. That's this one here, yeah? So that gets a very low, in some specimens, a very low separation. Yeah? And then we get to these ones, Dama valnetensis and Dama roberti. I didn't plot them in this graph because you don't see anything anymore. Yeah, oh, well, these ones, yes. This is roberti, and this is valnetensis, and this is roberti, yeah? And, but I didn't put in the recent Dama, the green ones here, because you wouldn't see anything at all, but they're more or less in this position, yeah? Now, we've got this one in TE9, complete antler, though deformed, and actually very similar to Dama roberti from Wakefield. Now, this is an antler which becomes very flattened here, and then I think there's at the beginning of 2 big tines, but we don't know. It has been proposed that this is the beginning of the palmate there. I don't think so. I think this is a reduction of the tines. And actually, you can measure also the distance of the burr to the first bifurcation. Here I had to do some estimation. And I did that in other specimens where I measured this, and they're usually very low. And since the one from Atapuerca is about here, should also be very low, I would expect that, yes, in the case of the second bifurcation. So I would suspect it to be somewhere here, but actually you find here. Now what happens is something what we know already from Dama farnetensis, that the middle time gets reduced, yeah? So I think we've now got a problem, how to separate Dama farnetensis from Dama roberti. I'll leave it at that. I classified in classifications, but well, okay. Now the different levels of Atapuerca. Now you can't read the species, you can't read the levels, I guess. But this graph has been published before in Co2 International, I think in 2014 or so. Only these are the new levels from the phantasma. Yeah. So you see the different species which appear, you see gradual change in the fauna, and you see to which levels these correspond. Yeah. Now, if we switch, it's only the ungulates, huh? Only the ungulates, my animals, so to say. Here you see the correlation to the time scale, and you see we are getting a relatively complete sequence. Though with some hiatuses in some very interesting times, but well, okay. With time, but well, maybe I won't see that, but with time, I guess that the sequence will be complete. Now the last slides about the faunal change. We see here, I think faunal change is related to climate. Yeah, we all think that more or less, I think, to the Milankovitch cycles and the beginning glaciations and this kind of things. Now there's important information which you can get. So we usually use the oxygen isotopes, but from that were derived these three curves. And this, the red one is the paleo temperature, yeah, on the northern hemisphere. So this is as present, and this is 5 degrees on average warmer, and this is 20 degrees colder on average, from publication by Van der Waal. He also did CO2, yeah? And here you see CO2 levels of the atmosphere estimates, yeah? And it's very similar to the temperature curve. No surprise, because we all know that greenhouse gases are related to global temperature, yeah? We see that there are many fluctuations, Milankovitch cycles, and we see a main decrease from the mid-Miocene climatic optimum at around 50 million years to the present, to the ice ages. Yeah? This is sea level, less interesting here. Now this is related in a way or another to the faunal turnover or the longevity of the species. Now here you see average species longevity in Europe and Africa. Yeah? The blue one is Africa. You see, fluctuates a lot. At some time, average species longevity, according to published data, is up to 5 million years. Yeah? But then, of this moment onward, it drops a lot, and it continues to be low. Now that coincides more or less with the spread of the C4 grasses. Also coincides more or less with the appearance of bipedalism, yeah? More or less. Now here you see the situation in Europe, the red line, and you see that at the beginning of the Pleistocene, the longevity goes down continuously. Now we can see that also in turnover. This is turnover, but actually it hasn't much use to look to that. But because if you've got one species and it goes extinct, you've got a turnover of 100%. If you've got 100 species and one goes extinct, it's a turnover of 1%. So maybe not the best. You have to relate that to species richness, which is done here. It fluctuates a lot, which is probably an artifact of the biozones used. But then you see at a certain moment in Europe, it takes off. And there's a lot of turnover. Yeah. Now that is actually, it starts here, and that is what has been called the Anthro-Franklin event. But you see, it's not just an event at one time. It's at the beginning of changes which continue to be stronger and stronger. Yeah. And if we look now to this period between 0.5 and 1.3, when all this started to happen, and we see here species which were present, and they gradually go extinct. But many more species arrive. Yeah? Maybe I should say something about the ages of locality. We have discussed this before several times, or I discussed it. Localities, how old are they? You put ages in hundred thousands of years or so. but many times they are not datings. Huh? So there is an aspect of subjectivity here. Now, actually, some of the localities here, like Ventamitena and Fuentenueva's 3, and so they have been dated and they're indicated a little bit younger, but I think it's still within the error margins. Yeah? Why did I put them younger? So there's a time when you get each time lower values. This is now the oxygen isotope curve. Yeah? When you reach lower values, that means probably colder climate. Yeah? So I think if something happens, it's because of the climate. So that's the main reason why I moved these to here. So other people like to put a locality like here, somewhere here. Well, okay. Well, if that's also within the error margin, okay, but a good reason for putting it in such a place, yes. So this is there is some subjectivity that I try to limit it to something what I consider to be reasonable. Yes? Now, okay, you see here several species coming in, new ones, many compared to the ones which go extinct. So there's an increase in species richness. But in part, this is also an artifact. You see, these species here are only present in cold periods. Yeah? And so they're not present all the time in Europe. So if you would have walked around the landscape, you wouldn't have seen more species at such a moment. Yeah? So in part, yeah? But anyway, you see, there's not one single event. It's a continuous increase in changes, yeah? At least as far as the record goes. Yeah? These are 60 localities approximately, so it's more or less should give a representative idea. Here you see the oxygen isotope curve again. You see the Milankovitch fluctuations, yeah, and you see the different cycles here, and you see an increase here, starting with stage 36, when things got colder, yeah, the climate got colder. I've seen more recent ones than this curve, and then apparently the record value was reached a little bit earlier, maybe in stage 38 or so. Well, okay, I can live with that. If localities can be a little bit older, well, okay, we can decrease the differences we have between the people who like old ages and me who I like younger. Yeah? But okay, now what happens? We get from this time onward in Central Europe or mid-latitude Europe, a new type of environment. So first we have got this one, we've got you can't see the photograph or the drawing, painting complete, but we have seen it several times already. That's the taiga. It's a wooded environment at mid-latitudes in Asia. And to the north, there's the tundra, which is too cold for trees to grow. And in the south, the steppe, which is too dry for trees to grow. In a cold period, the tundra expands southward, and you meet the steppe, and the taiga disappears. Yeah? And then in the following interglacial, its temperatures rise. Yeah? But the taiga is only restored slowly. So initially you start in maybe 10,000 years of interglacial. The Eemian here, as an example, a pollen diagram from Germany, and you see initially there's herbs. It says Kräuter. Yeah, that's herbs. And then one tree species after the other appears. Yeah. Now the diagrams in detail differ from one glacial to another, and I think from one place to another. But this may have allowed species to disperse from Asia into Western Europe. Species adapted to open environments, which wouldn't cross the forested environments of Central Europe. Now, if this started to happen at this time when cold climates were beginning, then we see also the appearance of bisons. Now, if you like to have some localities a little bit older, that's okay with me. But in any case, there's an association of humans and bison lazuli. Yeah. So I think this open environments allowed bisons to spread to Europe. And for just a very short period when it was warm and not a closed environment, may have allowed the humans to spread into Europe. And I think this is the end.